On the dot. So, welcome everyone for joining our webinar on organizing for enterprise agility. Before we can start talking about what organizing for enterprise agility, I want to introduce you to my colleague. I call him a good friend. I met John in one of my classes, which I was delivering in the enterprise coaching and the other coaching bootcamp, agile coaching bootcamp. And listening to him in the class, it was so inspirational. Some of the ideas which he brought in, and some of the areas which we explored, and we even offline, we sometimes he's like a sparring partner for me when it comes to enterprise agility or training leadership. Having a great sparring partner always helps us to look at things with a new perspective. It's like adding a new color to the rainbow. That's what John does. And when I saw John, learning from him, it's been amazing. It's been amazing. So a little bit about John. He's been an agile coach for more than a decade, more than a decade. And he has various experiences of working in coaching, in various frameworks. Remember, it's not about learning as many frameworks as you can, is understanding them and looking at what are the things I can harvest or what we can do as a team and helping them to get better. And he's been working as a senior consultant for on a global panel as an agile expert, member of various organizations, and he's been training and delivering and leading agile transformations for more than for various companies, and there are thousands of people he's been working with. So on that note, I want to stop sharing, and I also just want to introduce about myself. My name is Krishna Chodipille. I'm a consultant and a trainer and a coach for Leadership Tribe. My title is a chief storyteller. That's the title I have in my organization. Without further ado, I want to hand over to my colleague, John, and he will take us through the entire session for the next 40 minutes. John, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Krishna. I just want to share my screen. And there we go. So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Lovely to be here. Really excited to be here. We decided to call this Organising for Enterprise Agility because you know what? There are lots of people that are saying we are doing an agile transformation, and they get sort of into the team stuff, the scrum teams, but actually when you might well get those scrum teams as your experiment to start, and most organizations go through that experimenting stage. They get a few scrum teams, maybe a Kanban team here, and they build up some experience, and then somebody at some point says, you know what, these things are starting to work well. Let's start to think about doing an enterprise rollout. And everybody then says, oh, what about the frameworks and all this sort of stuff? So the first thing I'd say to you is, look, you don't need to start with the teams. You don't need to start with the agile processes or whatever. The thing to remember is that agile isn't a strategy. Agile is a means of achieving a strategy. So if we say that we got problems in the marketplace, our competitors are delivering product faster than us or cheaper than us, then it may be the solution might be to do some agile transformation in some of the part of the organization so that we can get our products faster to the marketplace. Somebody might say we're not delivering inventive products enough. We might need to deliver the new electronic car or the next iPhone app that is going to take the world by storm. And in which case, then we can use Agile for inventive teams. Somebody might say our products in the marketplace fail. We've got a quality issue. We might use Agile quality assurance and Agile processes in order to solve that product quality issue. So the thing to remember is that Agile is never the goal, it's an enabler to the goal. Okay, and so the fact that we were using safe or Scrum or Disciplined Agile or less or whatever doesn't really matter, because what we need to get clear about is what is our strategy and what is the outcome that we're seeking for. So we need to decide what needs to change. And in making that change, what we have to be careful of is that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Most organizations, unless it's a startup, have already got what is their brand. So they've got, there's the Mercedes brand there. Everybody knows what the Mercedes image is. If it was Coca-Cola, where everybody knows what the Coca-Cola brand is. And so what we need to do is we need to be sure that we know what represents our brand in the eyes of our customers and also of our employees, because don't forget, our employees are as important to the brand as the customers are. So when we're starting to think about moving to Agile and to Agile, creating an Agile organization, we have to make sure that we keep the things that are important to us, that distinguish us in that marketplace. When we create enterprise agility, we're talking about changing the DNA of the organization. It's foundational change. Okay, and we are talking about changing culture, working practices, organization, and so on. So we're actually changing quite major fundamental parts of the company, and we have to make sure that we change the right pieces. So don't forget, that organization is made up of interlocking personal relationship, it's made up of goals, it's made up of roles and responsibilities, it's made up of processes and attitudes and assumptions and values, most importantly values. So we need to decide what things we need to change in order to get to that corporate objective that we set ourselves. So let's start to think about that a little more, because I think when we start to think about organizational agility, we're not necessarily talking about IT. So if we start to think about, I've got a brewery that's like, I don't know, 4 miles that way from me, north, and that brewery produces beer. Okay, their Agile pieces is not around the IT delivery. It's around, can they get new products out into the market, and they produce a new beer, a new brand. They've just done a new whiskey, a new vodka, as part of their goals. So we're not necessarily talking about IT products. We're talking about how does the organization support the delivery of its components. There's a load of, I'll say it's rubbish being talked about, saying that every company is an IT company. That's rubbish, because what the vast majority of organizations are IT enabled organizations. And when you start to look at things like SAFe and some of the other methodologies and frameworks in the Agile space, what you find is that they are that they talk about everybody as if it's a software product company, and that's simply not true. So what we've got is, if you like, we've got a strategic planning operation, we've got a strategic organization, we've got people doing customer and market analysis, people looking at opportunities and threats, all in the strategic planning space. And most organizations have a strategic function. And to do that, to serve that function, what we have is something called operational value streams. Now, operational value streams are the value streams that generate money. So in a beer company, the value stream that generates money is the brewing process. If you're in an insurance company, the value stream that generates the revenue is actually the means of you actually selling a life insurance policy or selling a car insurance policy, but it's not your IT function. So operational value streams deliver to customers, and you can always identify them because they're always got some cash in there. Otherwise, unless of course you're in a non-profit organization or a charity or something. Okay, to support those operational value streams, the organization has what we call service value streams. Now, those service value streams are the tools or the processes that enable the business. So for example, financial accounting, maybe a service value stream, will be a service value stream in most, because it doesn't generate money, it records money and talks to gives the data to the shareholders about what the current state of the company is. Recruitment, HR, payroll, all of those sort of value streams are different to the operational value streams, and they support the operational value streams in addition to the delivery value stream. So operationally, now in the bottom panel of this diagram, we've now got our IT or development value streams. Okay. So what happens is that the operational value stream says, you know what, we would like to be able to get more information on a customer. So that operational need becomes a development need and goes into the business improvement backlog, which you've got on the left hand side. There's a demand intake process, the team backlog, and then we get the development value streams actually using the Scrum, which I've indicated by the curly arrow, as everybody knows. Then that development value stream will deliver those capabilities to the operational value streams. Okay, the agility is created by the operational value stream's ability to absorb those changes. So as agile practitioners, what we need to do is to look at that operational value stream and understand how it's operating, whether it's efficient, whether it's effective. And then what we need to do is to say, okay, we need to change something. How are we going to develop that change? That change will go into the development value stream, and the value stream will then be implemented, and then we can deploy it. So release on demand and all of those stuff that you've talked about and you've heard the SAFE lecturers talk about and so on, all happens there. But what we need to make sure is that we realize that the development value streams are there to serve the organization. They're not the organization unless, of course, you're a software product company. So I use something, we're not talking about making and setting up all of this and getting the organization to a point where we can start to think about enterprise agility. We have to tease out the differences between those value streams, and then you have to decide, how do we then deliver those? How do we make the changes to make the organization more agile in the context of the strategic goals that we've been set? Kotter calls out 8 stages of leadership, and the first stage of leadership, the first stage or step, is to create that sense of urgency. And we've got to start to think about, why are we making the change? So in one of my recent roles, the fact was that the market share was being taken by fintechs, and so therefore there was a sense of urgency because the lifeblood of the company was starting to dry up, and they needed to create I hate the word, but they call a burning platform. There was a reason to change. You also got to do, on the left hand side, I highlighted these 4 areas because there's no point in dreaming up the idea if you don't implement it. So we've got to institute the change. So we need to get action orientated. Okay, and we need to know what those results are that we've achieved, and if we've not quite achieved the results that we expected, then we need to start to think about it. All of that is driven, those sort of creating the sense of urgency, instituting the change, excuse me, is developed, and the plan is developed and mobilized by something Kotter calls the guiding coalition. That guiding coalition is a group of people that actually start to say, okay, how is the organization going to change? How do we come to a new organizational structure? What's the new processes that we need, and so on? And they work out the new strategic vision. They will build hypotheses and new target operating models and so on, and they will then create the plan. So what I'm going to do in this session is to talk to you a little bit about that guiding coalition, how to get the plan, and how to know that you're going in the direction that we want to go in. So guiding coalition is kind of interesting. It's not a steering committee. So what you need to think of is that this is an action orientated organization. It's a group of people, and but it does steer, but it's not a steering committee meeting. In other words, it's not reviewing the work of others, it's doing the work itself. Okay, it's a team made up of individuals from different parts and different levels in the organization. And when you start to build this team together and you set out their ways of operating and their social contract and so on, what you do is you start to get them to use language about equals, about to plan and mobilize, and they talk about behavior as a team rather than individuals with hierarchy, and you've got to get them to trust each other and criticize and call out and all those sort of things, which is all really exciting when you're starting to coach the C-level people or the transformational team. I've been doing this for a year now, so I've really enjoyed doing that. And they basic job is to plan, mobilize, and coordinate the transformational activities. Okay, typically the members take responsibility for specific elements of the transformation. I call them themes. So maybe there's an organizational theme, maybe there's a financial theme, maybe there's a tooling theme. But like a Scrum team, all the coalition members are responsible for the progress of the whole, even though they may be taking responsibility for a particular area. So we create a plan, an outcome-based plan, okay? And that outcome-based plan, I use a 30, 60, 90-day plan with horizons. You can see 30, 60, 90 days with an outcome described. You can see in there we've got some themes. We've got an organization theme, a teaming and finance team, a building the capabilities theme, a ways of working team. And basically what we need to do is to work out what work needs to be done in order to get us to the outcome. And that guiding coalition brainstorm ideas, they see things that are working, things that are not working, they get feedback from their peers in the organization, and they add things into this plan and they take things out. It's an agile plan in every sense of the word. What's missing? Well, I'll tell you what's missing. Every organization, when you start to get into agile transformation, they want to know, is it going in the right direction? They want some numbers, they want values. Only today I was asked, what are the savings that we're making? So you always have to have this measuring the progress, collecting the data, all of those sort of things. And the thing to do at the beginning of the transformation is to identify what benchmark data you will need, collect that benchmark data and start to use it. Now, sometimes you collect the wrong benchmark data, but sometimes you were able to, but unless you've got something to measure from the beginning, you're not going to be able to convince people that that you're doing the right thing or we're going in the right direction. So I think it's Drucker that said you can't control what you don't measure. But so the measures to me are the key thing, okay? And the measures are so important. And this where something called OKRs come in. Okay, the OKRs are, okay, what are the outcomes we want? And you might say we want to create more organizational agility, or we want to reduce our cost base, or whatever. We want to become more financially viable. So the key thing when you're using OKRs is the sentence which says we want this outcome as measured by. The as measured by has numbers in it. The outcomes do not typically have numbers in them. So this gives us a measure that we can then use to check how our transformation is proceeding and going. So this gives us a fundamental checkpoint, okay? So what I'm saying to you is don't use Scrum, don't use story points. It's more closely aligned to Kanban, I think. So start to set goals, okay? Instead of user stories. So you can't say, as a sales rep, I want to become more agile, because it doesn't work like that. What you need to do is to really use the OKRs to really guide what the team is going to do in the transformational set. So use the OKRs to set your goals. So use the outcome and the key results area, identify the actions or the tasks that are needed in order to achieve those measures, and then start to measure what you're going to be, the outcomes. Oh, it was Deming that said that rather than Drucker. I'm sorry about that. So really what we've got to do is to start to think about what are the tasks that we need to do in order to get this outcome, okay? And that outcome could be set as a quarter. You don't need to set it every 30 days. Set it as a quarter. Let's know. So we've got a quarterly wave planning process. We identify these are the outcomes that we want by the end of the quarter, and then we'll review the activities and the progress every 30 days. Okay, so quarterly wave planning will establish the OKRs, your desired outcome. And then what you do is to brainstorm the tasks that are needed in order to achieve those outcomes. So we started off, we said, you know, there is, we ran a survey. I think it was maybe September time. And in that survey, we asked people, what is stopping you become agile in your job? And we got a lot of data back. We created a Menti, and we got one of these word pictures with clouds with, you know, big words that are more important and smaller words less important. And we got the things that we started to say, and management attitude came out as like the big number 2 and number 3. You've got to remember, when you're talking about an agile transformation, the strategy has to come from the top. And usually what you find is the teams or the deliverers actually get agile very quickly, but the people that where you need to drive the change is actually in the middle layers of the organization. So we set out to start to communicate to these people. We set out a middle management community of practice. We started to give them values and beliefs and all the soft skills type training, you know, management 3.0 type stuff. And we started to work with that teams. Now we're just about to run that survey again. So that survey was run in September, and we're now just about run it again. So 6 months difference. So don't think that you're going to change an organization overnight. When you're talking about values, beliefs, processes, we need to take time to do that. Don't forget the processes, some of the processes stop the teams from being agile. So anytime you get a review and approval process, you're stopping a team being agile unless that review and approval process can be adapted to take incremental delivery of the deliverables that they're approving or reviewing. Okay, so what I'm saying to you is to look at the quarterly wave plannings, look at your OKRs, brainstorm what tasks, and then I'm going to say to you very fundamentally, use Agile Wisdom. Okay, and by that I mean, you know, there's a load of material in the lean space, there's a load of material in the XP space. I've got here the book, you know, Choose Your Wow from Disciplined Agile. Use the Agile Wisdom to justify what you're changing. And the reason why you do that is as soon as you get the doubting Thomases, as soon as you get middle managers saying, I don't think I ought to change, you can say to them, okay, let's run an experiment. Let's look at, this is what Agile Wisdom says that we should achieve by adopting a Scrum team or whatever it is. And then we can say, let's run an experiment and let's collect the evidence from our organization in order that we can justify and measure the outcome that we expected. And that agile, basing what you're doing in Agile Wisdom, takes it away from Jon saying the transformation should do this to Agile Wisdom saying we should do this. So you're looking at Mr. Lahman or Scott Ambler or whoever it is that you're using the information from. Then we have to look at WIP limits. Okay, this is a Kanban board. Your guiding coalition will come up with more ideas than it is feasible for us to do in the 30, 60, 90-day plan. So therefore, what we need to do is to start to prioritize the tasks using WIP limits and say, okay, how much work can we realistically get done? In the current transformation that I'm currently working in, we have gone that down, we've worked that back down to just 4 items, of which there's the 4 OKRs, and the tasks that we've got are probably, there's about 2 or 3 tasks each. So we're really not getting a lot of items on the task board, and then we're monitoring it using a board. We've assigned owners to the actions, and the team basically pick that up, and we then create a task board. We're using Teams as the task board. We're not using Jira because Jira's too techy, if you like. With the changes over with Microsoft Teams now, you can create a channel, you can get the tools are all there, you can whiteboard if you want, but you can create that task board so you can see where your progress is. So there's our task board, and twice or 3 times a week, twice a week, we actually walk the board. This one's a techie, but it just was an image so I could explain what we do. Once a week we walk the board, and once a week we actually say, what are the things that are stopping us from progressing, and we have a bit more of a chat about the team and so on. We've got here, the things that are in to do, with things that are ongoing and things that are done. We always start with the things that we think we're finished with, the full review or checking in with each other, those things, and then we go on to the things that are in progress, and then we go to the things which we have to do. We color code each one of these tasks so that we can say which OKR this particular task relates to, so that we can get a good picture of, are we progressing all the 4 OKRs at the same time, or are we missing one, and we can start to see the overall progress of the whole thing. Don't forget, let me just move that for a second. We create the task board. That's our plan, if you like. So we're using empirical control. We're using plan, do, study, adjust, the old Deming cycle. We start the task, we create the task board, we start the task, and then we see what the results are. And if it's not giving us the results, we pivot. So this means that we start to look at, do we create a new task? Do we stop this task? Do we push harder? We have to make that decision. And it's the guiding leadership that does that, the guiding coalition which does that. So we're looking at how we're doing on a 30-day, if you like, horizon. We might actually pivot faster than that if we really see something going not quite correct. And so that gives us quite a lovely view of the approach. So we're using Kanban in its purest sense, and we are looking at the results through the OKRs. So I would say to you, the agile transformation is led from the top. You always need to have somebody saying, this is the way we want to go, and for these reasons, and so on. The teams at the bottom enable the transformation, but we need to think about, how do we drive through those middle layers? And nearly all the tasks on our task board are not enabling the teams, other than by changing the way the middle organizational layer works. And this is a fundamental piece of the transformation itself. So let's look at just driving that through the middle layers first of all, right? So what we have to do is to look at, what are the anti-agile processes? So there's things like, personal incentive plans rather than team incentive plans. There's things like review and approval processes. There are things like toolkits and so on. Let's get onto those. But you can find the funding and the finances drive anti-agile practices. You have to get an estimate. If you get the finance team saying we've got to have an estimate for this, and it's got to be a detailed estimate, you need to get them to adjust to having a budget, and the budget is going to be worked on, rather than getting a detailed list of requirements. It's going to be at the big picture. So the funding processes and the finance process might be where we need to change. The portfolio management process, how do we get work started in the teams, and how does the work get funded, and how do we prioritize that pieces of work? You've got the pieces of work saying, okay, let's try and reduce the size of the work packages going through the change process, so that we can actually start to reduce the size, increase the flow. That might be something that you might need to think about. And then, of course, what we need to do is to start to match the capacity to the demand. And that is always a big problem, because typically if the organization has done anything, it's probably overloaded the development teams so that they can't do, their time is absorbed by context switching. So matching that capacity in that development pipeline is important, because then we get the enablers out into the organization faster, which means that we create the agility which the strategy wants. So the important thing is to make sure that we are matching the demand with the capacity of the organization to deliver. Okay. The review and approval process is a real bee in my bonnet. I've been doing some work with some guys down in New Zealand, and they've talked about adaptive governance, and I think it's great. You know, if the project is in, everybody knows what a green status is. If the project is in a green status, then why apply any governance to it? If the project moves to amber, let's put the brakes on and let's start to look at it. And if it's gone into red, then we certainly need to look at it. So that's the concept of adaptive governance. So, you know, does the team need to have a monthly steering meeting? No. If it's green, why do we need to steer? If it's in amber status, you bet. And if it's in a red status, maybe add us a steering meeting once a day. You know, there's all of us have been in those 9 o'clock calls to talk about the XYZ project, you know. So this is all examples about adaptive governance, and we might need to think about that. The other thing which is really important is to think about Agile QA. All of the QA processes that we use for the development pipeline typically use something called the V model. And when you start to break that V model down and say, no, we're not going to have a functional spec, so you therefore can't use that to drive the user acceptance test. When you start to get to that point, then you start to need to rethink the whole Agile QA approach, and, you know, using some of the things like TMAC Next for Scrum and you know, test automation and all of these sort of things in order to get the quality of the deliverables at the right level. Sooner or later, and I hate this term, there's a word called resource management, and I hate talking about resources, as every resource that I know is a people, unless it's a room or a computer. So basically what you need to start to think about is instead of planning workload by person, you start to plan and think about workload by team. And the reason for that is because we're going through that Tuckman model time after time, and we want the team to learn to work together and create expertise as a unit rather than individual expertise, because that individual unit then can add more value than the component parts of the membership. And the last thing you need is an ecosystem. The ecosystem is the tools, your process. You know, if everybody starts to think about, oh, which framework will we use? Well, actually, you need to use the framework that's right for your organization. And if you take any one of the Agile frameworks, which are, you know, let's face it, marketing to the extreme, every one of those need tailoring and tuning to your own ecosystem, to your organization, to the culture you want, to the type of work that you're delivering, and so on. So that ecosystem used to be a combination of bits of framework, tool sets, mechanisms, you know, all of that lot needs to be changed in the central piece. So we need to think about all of these 8 aspects when we're starting to drive through those middle layers. And a lot of the activities that I've got on that task board relate to these areas. So I think I'd short one about organization, that's about the ecosystem. I think there was one about ways of working, that's Agile QA, that's ecosystem, it's portfolio management. If you look at, there was something about metrics and funding, there's the funding box. In the cultural change, there's the anti-agile processes. So we're using all of this to drive our ways of working and so on, and to create the organizational agility that we seek. So there we go. Krishna, over to you. If there's questions, I can see there's one question in the QA. It would be great to answer any of them.
Fantastic, John. I think you need to make me a host again, John, because I cannot switch on my camera. While we are waiting John to make me a host, questions, you will be able to ask questions in the panelist. Make sure that you are asking questions so that panelists and the attendees can see it. So there was one question: are you streaming on YouTube or Facebook? Both. Manu, you should be able to see them both. So with respect to enterprise transformation change, do you have any questions? If you have, can you add them to the chat window, please?
I can stop. Where do I make you a host? I can't find that, mate.
That's fine. We can live with this. That's fine, John.
Okay.
How do you change middle management that have been in the same organization for years and refuse to change?
Oh,
All right, Shannon, that's a very beautiful question. John, you want to answer that first, or you want me to do that? Honest.
no, I let me have my 5 penneth, and then you can go.
Go for it.
There's a book by Jonathan Smart, which I think is called Sooner, Safer, Happier. Okay, and Jonathan Smart says, look, you've got, in an agile transformation, you get people that fall into 3 camps. They're the people that really want to explain, they want to explore and want to change. You get people that sit on the fence, and those people sitting on the fence are the people that you need to focus on. The people that are really doubting Thomases and they don't want to change, you can forget those, because what Jonathan says is, if you work with the people that sat on the fence and convert those to enthusiastic agile practitioners, the people that are left, that were the people that didn't want to change, they're either going to do one or 2 things. They're either going to join the fence, in which case you can work on them, or they're going to move on because they've realized that they're the ones that are out on a limb. So what Jonathan says is, work with that middle management layer, as long as the ones that are on the fence and they're willing to try and that sort of thing, and then you can start to move the transformation forward.
Thanks, John. Just to add to what John has said, one thing is, when you're talking about people not wanting to change, there's always a reason why. So as a child who's so excited to go down to a play day, like a picnic day, I don't know how many of you have nephews, nieces, or kids. When they're 4 to 6 years old, when they want something, you don't need to tell them. You don't need to explain to them. It's within the desire. They will chase you they will haunt you to get things done. So one of the examples what my colleague John has advised was, in the quarter's 8 steps, you got ADKA. There are different kinds of change models. So ADKA, for example, if you take one, so ADKA looks at from the human side of change and the organization point of change. So you need to take both those variables into consideration and ask, what are the things we can do to help this person going through this change? Especially for leaders, one of the hats they need to wear is, when a person is trying to change, that means they're going into some uncertainty, a new world which they haven't been before. When you haven't been in the new world before, they need to be coached, they need to be mentored, they need to be trained. You need to give them the tools to support them to go through those changes. And even after all these things, the person doesn't want to change. My coach told me, Krishna, can you coach a fish to climb up a tree and behave like a monkey? The answer is no. There are some things you cannot do, what you cannot do, but you need to find out, maybe the person is in the wrong place at the wrong time. I've worked with some organizations where these people were working in HR, but actually they were much more happier working in operations. So you need to find them what is in it for them. Even after that, there are sometimes you need to accept, if you get a pile of shit, try to polish it, no matter, and try to make it amazing. It's still shit. Sometimes I'm not trying to discriminate people who don't want to do it. You need to understand and go beyond just saying they don't want to change. There's always a reason. Find out what it is. And after all the hope and all the things you have done, it still doesn't work. Maybe the person is in the wrong place. That's something you can look into. Brilliant. The next question Shannon, I hope it answers your question. If you want to dig deeper, I would recommend you to attend one of the webinars. There's a really nice article on a LinkedIn page. And how do you coach your upstream leaders? How do you coach your managers? It's a wonderful article written by my colleague. You will find that one of my colleagues will be posting a link to our LinkedIn. So follow the company, and there's tons of free content out there. Please download it. So my colleague Chitra or Ashik, they should be able to paste that links for you. Good. And there's one question from Vijay Pukhe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name properly. How significant is PMI, DASSM learning and certification? Okay, Vijay, with respect to learning and certifications, if you're going, it's not for you. I think it's a generic message for everyone. If you're just going in for the certification, please don't waste your time on it. Think about what is the intent behind it. Some people want to go for certification so they can pimp up your CV, make the CVs really sexy so they can be more presentable, employable. That's one reason. It's okay. It's okay to have that reason. But if you're just going in for the certification, it does not add value, because sometimes in people who are very new are learning into this, they think they understood it, because half the time they are getting distracted. They are in for the training only for the certification, not for the content. They pick tiny bits here and there, and they tend to do more damage. So ask yourself, if you're doing the certification, what is in it for you? If you understand the reasons behind it, if it's just only for the job, or if you're going to learn something and help your teams to deliver some value, what is the value you're trying to do? And that creates your objective, so you understand when you go, before you going into your training, you have expectations. You will be looking at the learning objectives, your expectations, try to see if they are marrying. If not, investigate more, work with your trainers, facilitators, and see how they can help you.
Very good. Very good.
John, anything
Could I
else to
just,
add on that?
yeah,
Please.
I think to Vijay, I think the one thing to say is that PMI has bought Disciplined Agile, and it did that 2 years ago. And I think, you know, as a professional body, PMI's got many, many, many more professionals associated with it than many other bodies in this space. So the PMI Disciplined Agile qualifications, I think, are going to become increasingly more important, and they are scaling up right now in order to start to do that. And Disciplined Agile aligns very closely to the PMBOK. So what the PMBOK does for project management, Disciplined Agile does for Agile. The DA Senior Scrum Master qualification is gives you training how to deal with big teams. So the qualification would be equivalent to an RTE certificate in SAFE, or it could be, you know, one of the less training exams similar. So it's talking about, you know, conflict management in big teams. It's talking about big room planning, scrum of scrums, all of that type of content. So to go to Krishna's point, you need to think about that particular, if that is the type of skill that you want to learn, and that certification is relevant to your individual career path, then I thoroughly recommend, you know, that type of qualification. But if you have to think about, is it worth my investment? Am I going to get out of it? And so on. There's a lot of behavioral stuff in the DA space. There's a lot of process tailoring and adaptation based on context in the DA space. So it's quite a useful piece of learning.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Vijay and John. Mohammed, can I know what is fundraising process? I don't know what fundraising process. Are you talking about the enterprise level, John?
Yeah, I think right. So not every organization has a sort of development purse, and sometimes what you need to do is to convince senior management and maybe even shareholders that they need to invest in this, and you need to create a compelling business case. So agile transformations have a business case just like any other activity in the in the in an organization where money and investment of time and people and so on are needed. So raising the funds could be just as simple as we've got a budget for change that's 20 million or 50 million, and we want to allocate 10, 20, 30 million to agile transformation. It might be as simple as that. On the other hand, it may be that we don't have any money for transformation, and it might be actually getting people to take money out of reserves or whatever for that. So it's about getting the funding, and you have to be clear what the outcomes are and how it enables the strategies, and your OKRs and everything else will help you do that.
I found a very interesting, thank you, John. I found an interesting question from Maru. I'm being provocative here, so sorry. Where do all the approaches that try to install Agile using the non-Agile thinking like PMP, Prince2, and to a certain degree even SAFe fit into your thinking? So Maru, let me take a stab at it. The last time I checked, there are 39 different frameworks. Frameworks, for example, Scrum, Kanban, Lean, DSDM, SAFe. There are 39. Crystal, there's even a framework called Look at Other Frameworks with hundreds. There are hundreds of different practices. So no matter what framework you're talking about, any framework we have seen, most of them do not talk about how do you facilitate those difficult conversations? How do you take the human element into consideration? And when you're creating a strategy, how do you take your culture into consideration and help develop in such a way that we are able to bring in our employees, our vendors, as well as the customers into consideration? And how do we help them to make them better? So no matter what frameworks are there, they are all incomplete. If you do not take the human element, your culture, and all those things into consideration, you might be copying from one place to the other and trying to make magic. It might work, it might not work. Remember, the person who has written the book, he or she, they have looked at what worked for them, and they came up with a template which says by using this, it might help you. So if you're using it on the same principles, because I know,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because there are some organizations, even a Montessori or even hospitals, they use simple things like work in progress limit. They have Kanban boards. Even hospitals, ICUs, they have simple boards to help them to prioritize their work. So please don't. Yeah, please, John, go for it.
Sorry. Okay. So what I would say, Maru, is they're the source. They are a source of ideas. Do you use them as a source of ideas, and that will give you the things that you can check. So I said to you about thinking about Agile Wisdom. So if you've got super big teams, you might want to look at SAFe and take some ideas from SAFe. If you've got really small teams, you might want to go to a Scrum framework and take some ideas from there.
Brilliant. Remember, there is not one solution which will solve all the problems. But one thing you can do is, you being in the middle of the storm, looking at, being aware what are the different frameworks out there and what are the practices out there, and trying and experimenting to see what works for you. That's important. Taking an action is important. If you know for a fact that there is something out there which is already working and for your problem, lift and ship, copy and paste, and see if it works. Do something about it. That's the most important thing you can do. And learn and bring your teams with this experiment. This is what we have learned. What else can we do to make it better? Those things we are looking at, Maru. Okay, let me look at one more question before we go to the next one. So there is one in the chat window. That's from Mukunda Krishnan. In a company where some parts of the organization works well with the traditional way, but other parts of the other parts are better with Agile, is it fine to have it like that? That's an interesting question. John, thoughts, questions?
Why not? There's a saying that in change, don't change if it's not broken. So if the organization works in a traditional way and it suits the environment in which it operates and the market conditions, then why change? And it's fine to have bits of the company doing agile and some bits of it doing waterfall. If there is some piece that the waterfall piece is holding up the agile piece, or if agile is impacting the waterfall, then that might not be fine, and you might need to think about how to change.
Thanks, John. I can't agree more with John. One thing you need to do is, if you're trying to change, there should always a reason, a purpose why we are doing it. It should have an intent. If you're doing it for the sake of change, don't do it. Don't change things for the sake of changing it. I'm bored. What should I do? Let me do an agile transformation for my team. BS. Do not do things which for the sake of it. Always there should be a reason, a purpose. And if you're not able to measure the change, it's useless. And that's what John, my colleague, has said in the presentation as well. So